Technology moves fast, and now so can you. Discover Polestar, the all-electric performance brand vehicles redefining how we drive. Precision engineering, minimalist design, and software that evolves with you. Experience it at Holden Group in Norwich and Bury St Edmunds, or let us bring the test drive to your door. Proud sponsors of the Cambridge Tech Podcast. Polestar, electric performance, redefined. Discover at holdengroup.co.uk/Polestar. Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
I'm Faye.
And I'm James. So Faye, we're back. How was your break?
It was lovely. Yes, welcome back everyone. 2 weeks of forced rest. It was absolutely lovely. I think, like many people, I was definitely ready for a bit of a recharge and reset. So I'm glad to be back and starting 2026 nice and relaxed and refreshed. Do keep reminding me that of people, won't you? How was your time off?
Well, before we get to my time off, you always give me like your resolution for the year, and you always have a word for the year, don't you? Have you done anything like that this year?
I have, but I'm not going to talk about it just yet.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. All right, nice. We'll save that then.
Thanks.
We'll save that. Right, so I had a lovely... I'm not going to lie, I'm very rusty. In fact, if you hadn't emailed me this morning, there's no way I'd have shown up for the recording.
Brilliant.
So thank you for the reminder. But yeah, the break was lovely, lots of time with family and friends. So now I've just got to get my head back into work mode.
Yeah, and I think this week's kind of a nice week. Most people are getting back the Monday, Tuesday, even Thursday. So I think hopefully it'll be a nice start to the new year. I've got lots of things going on, and Thursday, something I'm looking forward to is the United for Cambridge event being held at the newly renovated Arts Theatre with the Cambridge United Charitable Foundation. So I'm looking forward to meeting lots of people there, and it seems right to start the new year doing something that's a little bit purposeful as well. So what about you? How's your year starting?
Yeah, I'm kind of straight back into prep for the final of the Trinity Bradfield Prize. So I'll be running coaching sessions with the finalists in the run-up to the final, which is the 28th. It's January now, isn't it? It's this month. Oh, my God. So you can still grab a ticket. They're available from trinitybradfieldprize.co.uk. So come along, watch the finalists present and network with the best of the Cambridge cluster. So why wouldn't you want to come? But yes, that's my main focus for January. So should we, there's only obviously a couple of pieces of news this week to start things off. Should we get into the news?
Yeah, indeed. So first of all, we've got Cambridge cluster company Paragraph, which is pioneering the commercialisation of graphene-based electronics using standard semiconductor processes. They've produced the first 6-inch wafer in its new manufacturing facility in Huntingdon, marking a significant expansion in the company's production capability and technology platform. The wafer contains graphene field effect transistors, GFETs, fabricated using Paragraph's proprietary process in which graphene is grown directly on silicon. The achievement represents a major step forward for scalable graphene electronics, and it is believed to be the first demonstration of GFETs on silicon using a direct growth approach at this wafer size. Until now, Paragraph has produced GFETs on 2-inch sapphire wafers using its contamination-free, transfer-free graphene growth technology. So the transition from 2-inch to 6-inch wafers is a major milestone, enabling higher throughput, improved uniformity, and closer alignment with established semiconductor fabrication infrastructure. So together with the development to include silicon substrates, this positions Paragraph to accelerate the development of scalable graphene-based electronic and sensing devices.
And our second story, Jonathan Cleave, who's the Group Managing Director at international business development consultancy Intralink, has released his own predictions for 2026, suggesting there are significant commercial openings for UK firms across Asia in the next 12 months. And we thought this was really interesting because these are kind of markets we don't typically talk about. So Jonathan highlights India, Vietnam and Korea as the most promising markets. And he says that UK tech has only realised a fraction of the potential of these markets so far, far and risks losing ground to fast-moving rivals unless companies accelerate their expansion strategies. Jonathan identifies India for automotive and electric mobility, clean tech, med tech and life sciences, highlights Vietnam as one of the world's fastest growing markets and as a prime destination for UK companies, and South Korea for its major government investment in AI infrastructure and next generation data centers, alongside the rollout of a new national AI regulatory framework providing openings for UK companies specializing in AI platforms, enterprise AI tools, cyber security solutions and infrastructure integration technologies.
Wow, so more markets opening up for people to consider. So that's interesting from Intralink as well. And the final thing is one from me. This Friday at noon is the deadline for 21 to watch. So if you are a very early stage entrepreneur or company, you have until noon on Friday to submit. Just head over to 21towatch.com and all the details are there.
So as regular listeners will know, we always start the new year with our annual predictions episode. So this is the 4th year we've done this with Ben Stanton at Deloitte.
Welcome, Ben. We're here back again in our 4th year. It's great to see you.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Very well. Now, I missed you last year. You had momentous news last year and I lost my voice. But thankfully, or unfortunately, I'm not sure which way it is, I do have a voice today. So I'm here. I'm here and I'm back.
That's shocking, Faye, because I feel like half the country currently doesn't have a voice and everyone's down with some form of lurgy. So the fact that we've all made it in one piece to this podcast is a minor miracle in itself. So I hope that's a good omen.
Absolutely.
I'm obviously looking forward to this, Ben. I can't believe this is the 4th time we've done this. I mean, where does the time go? A little observation for me as well, because when I was doing the preparation for this, going through the report and everything, every year, well, actually, the first year we did this, which was 2023, I don't know about you, Faye, but I felt like we were kind of showing up and we were listening and we kind of had a blank sheet of paper and we were just going to react to whatever Ben said. But when I went through the report this year, I actually felt, you know what, we've spent the entire year talking about all of these topics and these challenges. I feel like we could even have predicted maybe most of what was in the report, what was coming. Maybe the podcast is maturing and maybe editorially we're speaking to the right people through the year.
So, James, is there anything you'd like to talk to us about? It's the first episode of the year. Are you trying to steal Ben's job?
No, Ben can absolutely keep his job.
Very good.
That's music to my ears, so thank you very much. It's incredible that we've done 4 years. I don't know, for next year, for the 5th year, is that a big one? Do we need to kind of, because we're all remote now, obviously, but it would be nice to do like an in-person one as well with champagne. So maybe next year.
Yeah, I'm in.
I'll order the cheapest bottle of champagne in my local Lidl, and then we can have that.
I'm not in. It's that easy. And also, I was thinking, we just talked to you doing this episode once a year. I'm sure we're missing lots of other things as well. So we'll have to get you on. We're going to do live episodes this year. That'll give us an excuse to get you up to Cambridge as well. Or you never know, we might go on the travels as well again. Right. So let's get on with the podcast today. So just to level set anyone that is new, Deloitte predict trends each and every year. And that's what we're going to talk about. But before we get into the 2026 predictions, let's do a little recap and review of last year. We always like to put our guests on the spot and make sure that what they predicted actually came out. So for anyone who wants to go back and listen to the full episode, it was episode 121. I remember, because I did listen, even though I wasn't there, I did listen to the episode. And you said, Ben, that made me laugh, I think made everyone laugh, our best predictions are the ones you can't actually measure afterwards, which I thought was quite hilarious. But you did then qualify it saying the trajectory is generally right, but maybe the magnitude's different, because a lot of the things you're predicting don't necessarily have those definitive sources of truth. So with that in mind, one of the big things last year was on GenAI. And you were saying that 3 to 4% of people are going to be using GenAI. Has that increased? It was all in conjunction with the conversation about data centers.
On the topic of predictions, by the way, I was speaking to a guy the other day who works for an analyst firm who has just done a a forecast for smart glasses that go for a client of his that goes through to 2045. And I said to him, but you're going to be retired in 2045. And he said, yeah, that's the point. That's the best kind of prediction you can make. Where like there's no career ramifications. If it's wrong, you're long gone by then. So the beauty of our prediction, what I will say in defense of our predictions, is they are just for next year. I'm not planning to retire in the next 12 months, so that you do have the opportunity to chastise me if they're wrong. Yeah. So in terms of GenAI usage, there are two answers to your question. In terms of daily usage, which is I think we were talking about last year, of standalone apps, that's now at around 6% of people, which is quite, it's quite small in terms of the total population, but we do see, if you go to metropolitan areas in the UK, it increases massively just because of the nature of work. You could take weekly usage or more of a tool like ChatGPT or any of the standalone apps. That in the UK is about 20% now. But if you just go to Greater London, it's 40%. So it's like double in a metropolitan area where there is lots of knowledge work, and probably that other regions in the country will not take too long to get to the same point. So you can see the direction of travel. People are increasingly turning to these apps, becoming more familiar with them and what they can do. So it's one-way traffic.
And then before you answer the data center part of that question, let's just finish off the usage bit. You also talked about gender parity. Did we manage to get any closer with regards to gender imbalance in the use of GenAI?
Yeah, we got closer. I think so. We had a prediction last year that said, oh my God, look how many men are using AI tools versus women. And we thought that by the end of 2025, it would be pretty much equal. And it's far closer. We do a big survey in the UK of this. And the last time we did it was April, so it's slightly outdated. But at that point, it was 53% of men have used a GenAI tool and 42% of women have. So the gap is far closer than it used to be, but it's just not quite there yet. And there are lots of reasons for it. Wouldn't surprise me if we got somewhere near parity by the end of 2026, but I don't think we are there at the moment, unfortunately, but we're going in the right direction.
So then the other question I had on GenAI was, and this is definitely going to be a feature of what you talk about in 2026, so I'm guessing the answer is going to be yes, but did we start to see the predicted uptick in the use of agentic AI?
Yeah, for sure. There is a avalanche of interest in agentic AI, and our prediction last year was basically about companies launching proof of concepts, which, as you will know, are extremely cheap and easy to do and can take one meeting to set up. So it was kind of a low bar, but we thought 25% of companies that were using GenAI, which is now pretty much all of them, I would say, in the knowledge workspace, would launch an agentic POC, and we're pretty much there, because all it takes is one or two clicks on your ERP software platform, for example, to be able to play around with an agentic tool inside a sandbox or something like that. So no doubt that one came true, and probably we undercalled it.
Wonderful. Okay, well, let's turn the page to 2026. As Faye kind of alluded to, I'm sure we're going to have some listeners to this episode who are tuning in for the first time to the predictions episode. So maybe, Ben, you could just set the scene by walking us through the structure of the predictions and how you split them up into different categories.
Of course. So as Deloitte, we have been writing predictions since 2021. The current global rollout of these things looks like this. There is a 30,000 word report, should you want to go and read it, with a really dense amount of information in lots of different categories. It's published in 65 different countries in a number of different languages. So basically, you've got no excuse for not spending your entire January reading the whole thing back to back. But just in case that is not appealing to you, we can summarize, which is what we normally do at the start of these calls. We have lots of different buckets that these predictions fall into. There are 13 of them, but I think it's easier just to split it in half and just say there's tech ones and there are telco and media ones. So there are 7 on the tech side, and I'll just give you the headline, and then I'm sure you'll want to dive into some of the ones that are interesting to you and your listeners. The first one is about software as a service and AI agents. And basically, we have this thing called the Tech Value Survey. And what it says is 50% of companies will commit 50% of their digital transformation budgets to AI automation in 2026. And a big part of that comes from investing in agentic AI. So it's the extension of that kind of last year's prediction we spoke about before, which is why I'm so confident that we've probably undercalled that one. And there are loads of different kind of implications of that. But basically, it's a prediction all about how SaaS platforms have raced to build agentic capabilities and customers are going to buy it. So that's number one. Prediction number 2 kind of dovetails with it. So this is all about AI agent orchestration. And the point is that we now have agentic architectures and tools everywhere, but there isn't really a common framework for them to interoperate with each other. There's not a good way for multi-agent systems to exist, or even for agents to talk to the APIs of other pieces of software. So what we think is right now agentic AI is a $10 billion market, and it'll be either 35 or $45 billion in 2030, depending on whether we get orchestration right or not. So if we get it right, it'll be the top end. If not, it'll be the bottom. So those two are quite closely linked. The third prediction in tech, so this is all about AI in search, which is a huge topic. And what we're basically saying is the use of search engines that now have AI overviews at the top of them whenever you search for complex stuff is going to be far, far higher than the use of standalone AI apps. And that has huge implications for how information surfaces online and how people consume stuff about all the companies they buy from and interface with. So we think it's 3 times higher on search engine AI than it is on kind of your standalone AI app that is trying to encroach on the search industry. So that's number 3. And number 4 is about robots. So people get very excited about robots. And if you live in certain parts of the country, I think you guys are the same as me, where I live in a kind of a tech-savvy ecosystem of people, you would think that industrial robots are everywhere, particularly if you read the tech media and you listen to some of the big CEOs. The reality of the robotics market is, in industrial robots, it's only about 5 million. 5 million cumulative installed industrial robots in the world exist today. And we think by the end of 2026, it'll be a massive 5.5 million. So the whole point of that prediction is kind of to say this is a tiny market, really, but there are neat innovations going on that mean it'll grow faster to 2030. The next one is about AI and compute. This kind of links into data centers to an extent, but basically what we're saying is we think all of the news you've heard about the gigawatts of data center capacity that AI platforms need is basically correct. We think all their math kind of checks out, even though today we do far more inference as a proportion of compute than training for AI models. The kind of new ways in which we do inference and the inference techniques we use mean that we basically still need huge data center facilities with massive racks with hundreds of kilowatts of power to each rack. So we still think that that's going to be a massive theme, and that's where most compute will happen. It won't be at the edge. And then there's 2 more in tech. The first is on tech sovereignty. So this is a big theme, not just in Europe, but actually around the world. There are lots of governments investing to try and encourage AI compute to be built in their nation by their companies. So we think that there'll be $100 billion of investment in 2026. And then the last one's all about semiconductor supply chains, which is a really dense, if you're really into semis or really into supply chain, you'll love it, but it can be a little bit dense. But it's all about how quite critical semi technologies are going to be slightly more trade restricted in 2026. And these are technologies that generate tens of billions of dollars in revenue every year. So that is your it's a large bucket, but that is your tech bucket, and that's the 7 we have on tech. We then have 6 on the media and entertainment sector, which is a big part of what we do as well, and always seems to intersect with tech in a big way. So the first on media is on a new form of content, which is called a microdrama or a microseries. So this is the way to think about it. Imagine a 90-minute dramatic movie, but imagine it in vertical format, so TikTokified in many ways, and then imagine it split into multiple 3-minute episodes, and that's kind of what a microdrama is. And these are going wild in China and Southeast Asia, so they're extremely popular. They're becoming way more popular in the US, and we think basically they're going to go more global this year. So we think that's an $8 billion market in terms of revenue. This new form of media which has emerged. There's a lot of volatility going on with global major studios at the moment, but amid the M&A that's going on, they're also thinking, how can we get on top of this new content train as well? So that's one. The next on our media section is about generative video and social media. So there are loads of really great video AI models now. They create some challenges for social media companies, because on the one hand, it's great that there's new video that people can post, but on the other hand, it means that they are more subject to regulatory scrutiny, and we think that regulators in some US states and around the world will start looking more seriously at age verification and AI labeling as well, so making sure your AI videos are labeled as AI when they appear online. So that's the second one in media. The third one's about public sector broadcasters, and it's all about how they are increasingly relying on partnerships. So if you think about the great content you've watched on TV recently, it's very likely it's a co-funded production. So there'll be a kind of a big major global studio funding it with a UK broadcaster together and sharing the distribution rights between national and international. But also we see PSBs using YouTube and other ways of getting their content out there as well. So the future of PSB is all about partnerships and new channels to get your content out there, basically. Now, the fourth one in this section is about podcasts. So I suspect it's kind of fairly apt for you, James and Faye. And we are quite bullish on podcasts. So we think the global podcast industry will generate $5 billion this year. That's 20% more than last year. But a big chunk of that comes from video podcasts or vodcasts, which are better in many ways for advertisers and engagement. So that's where a lot of momentum is. And then we have two more in this section, and these are both on the telco side now. So we have one on satellite internet. So we think that the low Earth orbit satellite broadband market will reach 15 million global subscribers this year, and that'll be served by 18,000 unique LEO satellites. And then the last one on telco is about the ways in which telecoms companies can differentiate themselves. So we kind of touched on this before, but if networks become more homogenous to the consumer, how do you set yourself apart as a big telco? One of the answers is you buy all your users a free coffee once per week. Seriously. And that is how you set yourself apart from the next one that they could just as easily switch to. So we see a lot of investment going into these kind of reward schemes, coffees, gig tickets, cinema tickets, bars of chocolate, that kind of thing. And weirdly, there are these psychological triggers in people where it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, what your income is, you still respond really positively to a freebie. That's your two buckets. And that is 13 predictions this year, which is a lot. But we found it very difficult to drop any of those topics.
Wow. And it's a lot less than normal, isn't it? I mean, I think, what did you have? 19 last year, 21 the year before. Isn't it been an easy year for you this year, Ben?
Yeah, there's nuance though. There was 19 last year, but last year there were 10 big ones and 9 mini ones. So this year we have 13 big ones. It's a bit like a Christmas gift. It's like, how many big ones and little ones do you have? And I'd say 13 big ones is probably more of a burden than 10 big ones and 9 little ones.
I hear you.
Perfect. Well, so as you suggest, we're going to spend the majority of the rest of the conversation drilling into the tech predictions, but I think we might have some time at the end to maybe dip into some of the media and telecoms predictions as well. So if we rewind, we'll go back and we'll start with the SaaS meets AI. So as you said, your prediction is half of organizations will commit over 50% of their transformation budgets to AI automation. So I guess the first question, with so much uncertainty, do companies know what AI they need, what it means for them, what it means for their customers? And if the answer to that is no, then how do they unpick all of this? You know, this seems potentially like this is a big opportunity for consultants and integrators to step into that gap.
I'd say the answer at this point largely is no. And just to unpack that prediction a little bit, one of the implications of greater adoption of agentic AI that we see, more and more of our customers and more AI platforms are talking about changing the way they price. So the last 3 years of GenAI, a lot of these models have been priced on a per token volume of use basis. If I run API calls to a big large language model, I pay for the number of tokens of that model I consume. What we're now starting to see more customers of ours and more AI platforms talk about is shifting to per agent pricing model, or even like a per outcome pricing model. So one way to think about this is, imagine you're a call center, and instead of paying for the number of AI tokens I use, imagine that I could spend £15,000 for an AI agent that might be the equivalent of a full-time employee in my call center, or that's how you'd think about it commercially. So that's one model which is being talked about. And then in terms of per outcome, an example of that in the same way would be, imagine if you could pay for each call, inbound call, that AI agent successfully deals with, and the customer says that was a satisfying call. So this is the way that AI platforms in particular are now thinking about this. You look at the noise coming out of CFOs from big AI platforms. They're also talking about, if they work with pharmaceuticals companies, it would be great if they could take a revenue share for every drug that's discovered using their AI models or their AI agents, right? So there's a brand new set of commercial terms that probably need to emerge from this. That's not the worst thing in the world for consultants. So that's probably what we'll see play out in the next couple of years. In terms of what's happening now, what we're finding is we need to help clients with an agentic blueprint of some sort. There are a clear set of steps if a company wants to start exploring agentic AI, which is number one, you look at your data hygiene. And if that's garbage, you need to sort out your data hygiene. If it's decent, the next step is you have to help a client work out what agentic processes are even possible, and then which of those processes inside your organization are most exposed. There is something we have which is kind of for telco in particular, where you take a telco process framework. So there's a process framework in telco called ETOM, and it has rankings and grades for all the different processes in your telecoms company and how exposed they might be to agentic AI. And then you can start to work from that. So, you know what, maybe it's your market research function that can benefit, maybe it's your finance function that can benefit, but it really is looking sinew by sinew to work out where agentic workflows may be possible to create some sort of automation. And for most companies, it's so far out of the traditional way they think that it takes time to understand, which is why, particularly for last year's prediction for this year, we're quite bullish on investment into this space. It will take a while for that investment to materialize into serious outcomes, because it turns out a massive organizational transformation is really hard and complex and sticky. That's why consulting firms exist.
Now you can get directly involved with the show. Leave us up to 60 seconds of audio by visiting cambridgetechpodcast.com on your computer or phone and click Call the Show from the menu. Send us your news items, events to promote, leave us feedback, or suggest a guest.
I think it's that balance. You know, we talked about cost saving in last year's prediction. Actually, I think these two come together a little bit. So they've got to do the transformation. They know they've got to adopt new technologies, but they've also got to cost save. So I kind of feel it's a bit of a mashup of all of those things.
We speak to people up and down organizations. I'm quite privileged in my role that I get to speak to junior staff as well as senior staff, but not just across our clients. I get to speak to non-clients all the time as well. One thing you hear more often than not is there is a kind of board agenda to drive AI adoption down through an organization. There's resistance because I think sometimes employees or even kind of the X-code feel board doesn't understand the technology well enough. And that's one thing we see across the country is it would be great if senior leaders and managers understood the benefits and limitations of this tech before they really try to kind of strong arm it into their organizations. But there is a, perhaps if I dare say, kind of FOMO effect happening now, where I think lots of companies are desperate to not be left behind and therefore are constantly asking themselves, how can we do AI? How can we do agentic? And then not asking themselves, what are my biggest problems in my organization? And is AI a good solve for that problem? Sometimes it isn't. So that's kind of, it's natural human kind of cognitive fallacy playing out in real time, which is, oh, I don't want to be left behind, but you don't think about problems in a logical way always. So we see that all the time as well.
Yeah, you talked about existing platform vendors adding AI functionality to their platforms. So clearly the advantage there is those platforms have already been adopted by organizations and they're already embedded in those companies. So I guess that reduces that adoption barrier and that experimentation with new features. You mentioned the amount of capital pouring into AI and startups in the field. What's your take on your enterprise customers? What's their opinion towards AI startups? Do they see this as still quite early, quite high risk, a little bit Wild West? Are they willing to place bets on newer, smaller companies, or are they favouring that going down the route with their existing vendors?
I have conversations with companies that will tell me, I'm so glad I didn't start building my application on top of AI models 18 months ago, because if I did that, they'd already be out of date. It's incredible how fast things have changed. Even just a year ago today, we'd only just got the first kind of commercially available reasoning models, which are effectively a foundation for agentic AI, launched by one or two of the platforms. So it's kind of, if you tried to build apps 18 months ago, you wouldn't have been able to do so with chain of thought reasoning, or you wouldn't have been able to do so with any of the nuances of agentic that we now know are quite important. What I would say though, and kind of startups versus big companies, is like, the truth is, every major tech purchase deserves scrutiny, and supply chain optics can be good or bad, whether you buy from a startup or whether you buy from a large established enterprise. But what most IT departments will do all the time is create a decent redundancy strategy anyway. Think about the hyperscale cloud providers that serve companies in the UK. Every single one of their major customers, I guarantee you, somewhere in their company has a written down migration strategy for if that hyperscaler lets them down. If you are an AWS customer and you're a big one and your business processes are dependent on AWS, you have a action plan that you can execute immediately to leave and migrate to another platform if you need to. And it's fast and they're fully baked, ready to go. Same if you're on Azure, same if you're on GCP. So I think that companies should be just diligent. If they're building new business processes around AI, whether they use a startup or not, it's good business practice to do that. And I expect that the leaders are doing that anyway. So it shouldn't matter too much. And the other thing is, there is a lot of convergence in model capability anyway. So we're getting to a point where if you are building on top of an application on top of one AI model, or maybe running calls to one API, I don't think it would be particularly disruptive to have to migrate to a different API, because a lot of the frontier models are benchmarking around the same caliber. I don't think that companies building applications should be too concerned, and there should always be a redundancy strategy anyway. Go for startups, why not?
I mean, as you say, it just opens up that orchestration opportunity, doesn't it? And as you describe, you see that hybrid model with people switching in real time between hyperscalers, so that's an interesting opportunity for AI. And then the final one for me before I hand back to Faye for the next topic is more of an observation, which would be interesting to get your take on. When you describe the benefit of GenAI being embedded in search as the primary kind of discovery channel or user interface, it triggered a thought that, are we seeing a similar situation to back in the 90s, where originally the web browser was bundled into the operating system, and then regulators, felt that was a unfair advantage, so they had to strip the web browser out. Do you think we could find ourselves in similar territory by embedding AI into search? Because obviously search is dominated by Google.
I would argue search hasn't needed to change much in the last 20 years. And I won't just call out one of the search engines. I'd call out every search engine that people currently use and say that if you think about the UX, it's basically been the same. Oh, here's a search box and here's the company logo right above it. You search and then there are 10 blue links that appear on your page based on the keywords you use. That is a globally dominant UX for information discovery for 2 decades. Now, because of the speed with which standalone AI apps have gained users, everything has changed. But in terms of regulation, I think you already see it. So the challenges of AI baked in search engines are that you probably have an increase in what's called zero-click search, which is where a user goes onto a search engine, searches for something, gets the answer they need from the search engine. You don't have to go onto any websites. So there are lobbying groups like the Independent Publishers Alliance that are really concerned that all their content website partners are struggling to generate traffic in the same way because people just stay on the search engine. You can see why a regulator would care, and there are regulatory precedents for this already. There are neighbouring rights in some parts of EU reg which are to do with featured snippets, which is like the featured snippets are the predecessor to AI overviews, where when you search something online and you get like an excerpt for a news article that appears, but it's a word for word, it's like verbatim with the source right there. So featured snippets, so neighbouring rights under EU reg require a license to use content. So if you start surfacing content that you don't have a license to surface as a search engine, you can be penalised, and some have. The challenge with AI is when you use AI to do the same thing, basically what you're creating is this brand new composition at the top of people's pages that all of a sudden you can't really track it back to one company that you need the licenses from. It might be built from 100 or hundreds of different news sources, all aggregated into one AI overview response. What I'm effectively saying is there is regulation out there that seeks to solve this issue that I think is appropriate for technology which is now out of date and is not appropriate for the technology that exists. It wouldn't surprise me if this is an area where regulators attempt to retilt the balance of internet power a little bit back in favour of content websites, because they have tried to before. It's just the existing reg doesn't really work. You can't really enforce it because AI creates this new composition that is far more difficult to attribute.
When you were talking about industrial robots earlier on, you kind of focused on those. I'm wondering if we can pick up on the humanoid robots. There's been an awful lot about that in the media last year, and we've had lots of talks on it. Is it hype? When do you think that realistically that's going to start picking up?
Part of the reason people love stories about humanoid robots is because it reminds them of science fiction. It's kind of more inspiring and scary all at the same time. So our forecast for industrial robots overall, including humanoids, mostly non-humanoids, is there are 5 million actively installed in use in the world today. There'll be around 500,000 shipped in 2026. So you'll end the year at about 5.5 million. In terms of humanoid robots, there will be between 5 and 7,000 that ship worldwide in this coming year. And it's pricing about $18,000 and up. So it's not massive. And I feel the same way about humanoid robots as I feel about AI, actually, which is I think technology works best when it tries to solve one problem at a time. And I struggle to see a situation where a humanoid robot is better at one thing, like a defined application, than a purpose-built robot to do that thing. So you can ask yourself the question, is a humanoid robot better more effective and faster at washing dishes than my dishwasher, which is a purpose-built machine which never breaks my dishes, which cleans them perfectly every time, that doesn't need to pick up and kind of hold them with different levels of force and tactile feeling, that isn't going to fall over, that doesn't need, by the way, to go back to its battery pack and recharge or change battery every hour. So I think that's one of the big things limiting humanoid robots, is that they are extremely exciting and the press love them, because if you publish a story about humanoid robots, you get lots of engagement on a news article. But in the real world, usually purpose-built technology beats general purpose technology every time. So I suspect with robotics, we do see inflection points. There are things called vision language action models, which are making it easier to train robots to do stuff in lots of different contexts, but they will be best applied in purpose-built robots that don't look like humans, because we've evolved from cave people with arms and legs that are built not necessarily for manufacturing tea towels or whatever you might want to do in a factory. So purpose-built robotics, I think, will inevitably win, but we'll always be obsessed by humanoids, and the news stories won't slow down, but what actually ships won't be massive.
Yeah, so an obsession rather than reality.
Probably. They're coming into the consumer space now as well. You can now buy fairly expensive consumer humanoid robots, but I don't suspect most households will do that, particularly not in the UK.
Yeah.
Perhaps one or two in the US will. They have bigger houses than us, unfortunately, that maybe a robot can fit in. I think you will find they are not particularly useful for most household tasks in the next 12 months.
So you're saying it's 2027 before a humanoid robot comes on to do the predictions episode?
You're going to have to wait until our next year's predictions and come back for episode 5, where we have little champagne, and then I'll be able to answer that question.
Okay, technology sovereignty then. This is a recurring topic on the podcast over the last, probably the whole year to be fair, but certainly over the last 6 months. So in your data, you share that 90% of AI compute is currently managed by US or Chinese companies, and you're predicting that will reduce by 10% by 2030. So not huge changes there, but it's going to need $100 billion of committed capital to build that capability outside of China and the US. So I guess the obvious question is, where are we going to find that capital and where are we going to find those skills?
Most serious companies are quite pragmatic about this, and I think most clients that I speak to that say, look, the future model for our compute is we're going to have some data in the public cloud, some data will be in my on-prem basement data center, some data will be in a telco data center that may or may not be sovereign, might have some data on AI, on edge devices. So they will have a dynamic and changing approach to having different locations for compute and storage. But to answer your question more directly, I don't think, I have to be quite careful with my wording. It's not difficult today to find capital to invest in digital infrastructure. There are a lot of entities very willing to invest in that space, as you've probably seen from large global announcements around the world. So even just in the private sector, there are a lot of banks and lenders that are delighted to find digital infrastructure projects based on AI compute that they can invest in, regardless of where in the world it is. So there's no shortage of capital waiting to find its way into those kind of projects. But then you also have the other pillar to this is government funding. So you do now have the Sovereign AI Unit inside of DCIT as well, with hundreds of billions of pounds of funding on its own. So at the capital side, I'm not that worried about. I think the skill side may be slightly more of a challenge. But what I would say is, we are, in the UK anyway, we are one of the most digitally advanced countries in the world. We have lots of hyperscale data centers already. So kind of underestimate our skills base at your peril, but there are always, and this is not just the case for the UK, but other markets, government skills initiatives looking at where there might be gaps and how skills programs can fill those gaps. I actually don't think it's not completely outside of our wheelhouse as a nation to build AI data centers. I've always found for the UK, it's building applications and then scaling those globally, which is the tough bit. We can build digital infrastructure, particularly if there's money to do it. It's just how do you use that to create the real value and then sell it to other countries is where we've always struggled.
Okay, so let's wrap up then with, so again, we're not on the media and entertainment side of it going to go into any detail, but I have to say, Ben, you've caused me a problem with one of your predictions. Can you guess which one it is?
Is it podcasts?
Yeah, vodcasts. Thanks very much for that. So James has been discussing this for a while. I have to say, actually, start off, right at the beginning, we made the decision only to do audio because James didn't want to do video. And now this year, James has started going, I think we actually need to do video. And now you've put it in your predictions. We've got to do video.
Well, we want a slice of that. What did you say? 50 billion? We need 5 billion. Oh, that's a bit disappointing.
It's only 5 billion.
Oh, I didn't think
yeah, maybe put the other 45 billion pounds worth of products back in the basket. But that's it. Well, the other thing about podcasts is it can commercially possibly a little bit smaller than many people realise in terms of advertising revenue, but it is a fast-growing portion of the sector. And you compare it to kind of commercial radio, gains ground every year. It's the right part of the industry to be in some sense.
Yeah, and I think it all adds to the whole authenticity bit that you're actually seeing people, you know that it is authentic. But then you counterbalance that with the idea of microdramas. I mean, seriously, do we need more small bits of information that's possibly not going to give us any more value? It does kind of worry me with sometimes the directions we're taking.
Are we going to release a microdrama each week this year then? Is that what we're going to do?
I feel my whole life is a microdrama, James, as well, you know.
I think if you see the caliber of acting in the top,
be careful what you say here, Ben.
Microdramas in the world, I think you guys have a good shot of. It's not a high bar to be able to get to. Currently, the point of that prediction is like there is lots more investment and professionalization going on in that space. But on podcasts, what we're saying is it probably makes sense for you to take video a bit more seriously because what we see now is one of the data points we have out of our US team is people that are listening to a podcast. It's around 29% of them say, I never multitask at the same time. But people that are watching a podcast, it's around 44% of them say, I never multitask at the same time. So you have to think that kind of if you've got a visual element, people are more engaged. And that's why advertisers are like, you know what, we'll spend more to advertise on this because there's more chance people are actually paying attention at the point that my advert pops up. There are all these different reasons why it makes sense, but you also see the big video platforms in the world now circling, which is why you see deals like Spotify plus Netflix. So Netflix is starting to move into this space as of 2026 because it realizes, you know what, we're a big video platform and video podcasts are a really fast growing portion of that market and we want a piece of the pie. So maybe next year you'll be in Netflix.
So a couple of other things then in the media and entertainment side of things. At the end of last year, Australia obviously brought in the regulation around banning social media for under 16s, which obviously grabbed a lot of attention. I'm guessing other governments are observing with interest in terms of how that goes. What's your take on the regulatory side of social media moving forward?
My view is that the restriction or prohibition of social media for young people is probably the next major wave of digital regulation that happens globally. I don't know if it will be as severe everywhere as it has been in Australia, but just my personal view is it wouldn't surprise me if lots of governments were taking this very seriously. We've been talking about this a lot. In my team, across many of our UK partners and clients this year, we have data on this. The mid-year survey that we did suggested that it's about 3/4 of people in the country would support a social media ban for under 16s. And just over half of people who are 16 to 29 years old in our survey also would support that ban for under 16. So that's people who've grown up with social media, not wishing it on those that come after the younger siblings, those that come after them. The point we would make is it's something which looks like it may be politically popular to do. So if there is anyone in a position of political power that needs a popularity boost, not just here, around the world, it will be an appetizing place to look. So that's what we think. But then these things are always politically popular until you try and enforce them. And then when they are enforced, regulations can quite quickly turn. And what we saw, particularly with the Online Safety Act earlier this year in the UK, or in 2025 in the UK, is that it's extremely popular until the point where people have to people over the age of 18 have to verify themselves, and then they get grumpy about it because it's an extra friction in their lives. But it is a really hot area of regulatory interest. Wouldn't surprise me if there were more countries willing to take action, but they're just waiting to see how the pieces fall in Australia, because it can go one or two ways. Either young people now spend more time outside frolicking in the fields like the good old days, or they just find their way to circumvent the rules or find their way onto darker places of the web. So I think we need to be extremely careful in how we approach this, which is why lots of countries are waiting and seeing what happens there.
Well, Ben, thank you. That's great. I mean, as always, it gets the grey cells working again after a break over Christmas. So thank you. Do pass on our thanks again to all the hard work that goes in from the rest of the global team at Deloitte. As you said, everything's on the website. So go to Deloitte.com. Our listeners in 97 countries, there might even be a translated version for you on there as well. And we'll put the link in the episode too. So thank you so much again, Ben. It's been great to talk to you, and a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Today's show was produced by Joe Donaghy of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.
Now you can get directly involved with the show. Leave us up to 60 seconds of audio by visiting cambridgetechpodcast.com on your computer or phone and click Call the Show from the menu. Send us your news items, events to promote, leave us feedback, or suggest a guest.